Ferrari's own workshop built the body panels for the car that would end its World Championship reign in Modena, Italy, 6 miles from Enzo Ferrari's factory gates, and neither side realized it at the time. The man who put it there wasn't a rival manufacturer. He was a bankrupt Texas chicken farmer with a heart condition his doctor said would kill him within 5 years. By 1965, his 6-car garage project had done what no American company had ever done: beaten Ferrari for the FIA World Championship. To understand how, you need to go back to the moment Ferrari looked untouchable. Through the early 1960s, Ferrari didn't just compete in GT racing, it owned the category. The 250 GTO won the FIA International Championship for GT manufacturers in 1962, 1963, and 1964, sweeping the Tour de France automobile in the same period. Only 36 GTOs were ever built, and that scarcity became part of the myth. An engine and chassis so refined that no volume manufacturer could touch it, campaigned by factory teams and privateers alike who piled up podiums almost by default. The GTO could hold roughly 174 to 183 miles per hour. Nobody in GT racing was close. Enter Carroll Shelby. Before any of this, Shelby had been a championship-winning driver. He won the 1959 24 Hours of Le Mans in an Aston Martin, climbing onto the podium in the bib overalls he had worn since his chicken farming days because he had not had time to change. A year later, a heart condition that had shadowed him since childhood forced him out of the cockpit for good. Instead of stepping away from racing, he pivoted to building cars, and by 1962 had stuffed a Ford V8 into a lightweight British AC chassis to create the Shelby Cobra. The Cobra could out-accelerate a GTO, but it had one crippling flaw. As an open cockpit roadster, its aerodynamics topped out around 157 to 160 miles per hour. On the 3.7-mile Mulsanne Straight at Le Mans, that gap cost the Cobra roughly 10 seconds a lap, enough to erase any advantage in the corners before the race even got started. So here is the problem Shelby actually had to solve. Not power, not grip, drag. And the fix his team landed on would come from a young, largely untested designer working without a wind tunnel, building a car in a shop sitting almost literally in Ferrari's backyard. What that car would go on to do to Ferrari's GT program, and what it would quietly set in motion for Ford's assault on Le Mans itself a year later, is the part of this story most people never hear. The designer was Pete Brock, and his answer was radical. A closed, fastback coupe body with a camback tail, shaped almost entirely by eye and instinct rather than wind tunnel data. Skeptics inside Shelby's own shop doubted it would work. Brock built it anyway. The first prototype, chassis CS-X2287, went from drafting table to finished car in about 3 months, built at Shelby's own shop in Venice, California. The other 5 chassis were shipped to Carrozzeria Grandsport, a coach builder in Modena, Italy, Ferrari's home turf, because it was cheaper and closer to the European races. Ferrari's own hometown built the enemy's body panels. The car earned its name at its debut, the 1964 Daytona Continental, where it led for 7 hours before an engine fire ended its day. Nobody wrote it off. At Riverside that February, driver Ken Miles found the coupe lapping 3.5 seconds faster than the open Cobra Roadster, with a 390 horsepower V8 pushing it past 185 miles per hour, at least 30 miles per hour quicker than anything Shelby had fielded before. A month later at Sebring, the Daytona Coupe took its first win, GT class, 4th overall. At Le Mans in June 1964, it won the GT class again, clocking over 196 miles per hour down the Mulsanne Straight, closing the exact gap that had doomed the Roadster. Ferrari noticed. At one point that season, the GT class at Monza was abruptly canceled, a move that conveniently protected Ferrari's shrinking points lead. It wasn't enough. Shelby's Daytona Coupes finished the 1964 championship second to Ferrari, by just 6 points. 6 points. Close enough to be humiliating for a manufacturer that had never lost a GT title in 3 years. And Ferrari's response wasn't to fight for a 4th straight championship, it was to leave the fight altogether. At the end of the 1964 season, Ferrari formally withdrew its factory effort from GT competition, shifting its full attention to the faster prototype class to take on Ford's new GT40. The car that Ferrari had dismissed as an also-ran had, in one season, convinced Enzo Ferrari there was no longer a fight worth having in GT. With Ferrari out of the way, 1965 became a coronation. Shelby himself had been pulled onto Ford's GT40 program by then, so the 6 Daytona Coupes were handed to Britain's Alan Mann Racing to finish the job. They delivered, with wins at Daytona, Sebring, Monza, and the Nürburgring, and clinched the FIA World Championship for GT manufacturers outright at the 12 Hours of Reims in July, winning the class by 19 points. It was the first time an American manufacturer had ever won an FIA World Championship title. Remember the GT40 program that had pulled Shelby away mid-fight? That was not a coincidence. It was the direct result of what the Daytona Coupe had just proven. Ford had watched Shelby's tiny operation embarrass Ferrari's factory team with 6 cars and a shoestring budget, and decided he was exactly the man to run its assault on Le Mans overall. Shelby American went on to campaign the Ford GT40, delivering 4 consecutive overall wins at Le Mans from 1966 through 1969, beating Ferrari at the one race it had built its entire mystique on. The Daytona Coupe was not a footnote to that story, it was the proof of concept. Only 6 Daytona Coupes were ever built. One of them, CSX 2287, went on to set 25 land speed records at Bonneville that same November. Today, those 6 cars are among the most valuable American racing cars in existence, owned across the decades by collectors ranging from record producer Phil Spector to Walmart heir S. Robson Walton. A chicken farmer with a failing heart looked at Ferrari's untouchable record and decided the fix wasn't more money or more power, it was a shape nobody in Europe had bothered to try. 3 years later, Ferrari wasn't just beaten, it had already left the building.